Hi, so today we're going to be listening to the Arturia Dist COLDFIRE distortion wave shaping plugin. It's got a lot of features and I think it sounds really great on guitar, so I'm going to play some guitar for you through it so you can hear it. And we're going to have a closer look at the plugin. But before we get started, if you can like the video and subscribe and ring the bell and press the thanks button, that's really helpful for keeping the channel going and really appreciated. Okay, let's have a listen. So I really like the tonal quality of this wave shaper. It's just one of a handful that I found that give me something really kind of new sounding from a guitar point of view. So there's loads of plugins out there, you know, wave shaping plugins and distortion and bit crushing and everything else. But I find almost all of them, most of the sounds in them, if not all of the sounds, to start with, like there's a lot of fizz. To my ears, it's just too much fizz for me to work with, and there's too much kind of mess around the notes once you really push it into moving the sound any significant distance from the original. But as you can hear from this, it's not doing that. There's a lot of distortion. The sound is taken a long way away from the original guitar sound, and yet it's nice and tight. It's not loads of fuzz all over the place. It's not a big mess. It's tight and it sounds tonally interesting. Same thing with high notes. Really nice, smooth, tight, and not loads of mess and fuzz all over the place, which is, as I said, with almost all the rest of them, is what you get once you push things past a certain point into something that's really, you know, different sounding than the original. Or they end up sounding very much off in the direction of a high gain amp with loads of distortion, and we've already got that in many different forms of that. Or maybe they might sound like lo-fi bit crushing. Again, we've got loads of those, but not a lot of plugins that do something kind of different and interesting sounding, and this one really does. And to me, that's of great interest. So we'll have another bit of a look at it and see what else it does. Okay, so here we are with the Arturia Dist COLDFIRE, and I'm going to play this guitar, which is the live take you saw me play just before this, without this on it, and then bring it in so you can hear what it's like without, and then you can hear the difference. So that just gives you an idea. It's a sort of electric guitar sound with like an amp sound, but not a huge amount of distortion. And also when I bring this in, you get a lot more distortion happening. So I like this because it's got a nice sound to it, but it has also a lot of features to it. It's got two distortion sections which are identical to each other, and you can run them in series, stereo, mid-side, split band, or parallel. Now, I'm not going to go through all exhaustively showing you the whole thing, because there are other videos out there doing that, but I'm just going to give you some ideas about the kind of sounds it can make and a little bit of an idea of how it works. So if we start with this one here, you can see there are a bunch of different starting types of process. So wave folding we've got here, and then within that I've got a bunch of different types of shapes, which then you drive with the drive to fold more or less of those shapes into the waveform. And wet dry output, which drives either into this or alongside this or through one of these other routing processes. And then you've got the same thing again here, so you can have two different types of distortion processes going together. What I really like about this particular plugin is that you can get some really nice sounds out of it that aren't driven into complete breakdown and breakup. That's where I think it shines. There's an awful lot of distortion plugins out there that can drive things in complete destruction. And by the time you get to in series, unless you've got them turned down really low, in which case you can get some really nice combinations. But if you turn them up at all, you know, you just get complete destruction of one kind or another. To me, that's not of any interest, but of course for some people that may be exactly what they're after. But I do find myself using it sometimes with the two at very low levels, so that together they create about the right amount of distortion that I want. So a lot of options there though for different tastes and uses. But I'm going to stick with this one for the moment. You've got a pre-filter up here. Now I think my one request for improvements on this would be the filtering. These really interesting filters they've got here, I actually think would be more interesting to have after the distortion than before it. A lot of times I'm finding they're not making a massive difference, but I know that, you know, things like comb filters can really affect the sound dramatically. I'm not finding as much of an effect as I would expect, but I think it was after the distortion you would get that. So I'd love to have the option of moving this to afterwards. I'm not saying it isn't a nice feature. It is a nice feature, and it's nice to be able to control that filtering. And I'm sure for some sources it's probably exactly what you want, but for the kind of things I use it for, I find myself like not getting that much from this. That's making a huge difference for me. The post filter is essential. What I'd love to see with this is a resonance control. That would be really, really useful, and I find it like it's a little frustrating not to have that resonance control here. Also, this is not automatable with the modulation, which would be really nice to have. Again, it's the post filter that you really makes to the way I use these effects anyway. This is what really makes the difference to the sound, is what you do after the drive, as much as before. And for me, the way I use them, it's a lot more than before. So it'd be wonderful to be able to automate this, but unfortunately that's not available at the moment. But they sound nice, these filters, so that's good. Then we get a compressor that can be useful, and a feedback. This feedback is kind of interesting, and I found it was sometimes give me some pretty interesting effects. I think you might find it more useful on percussive sources than the way I'm using it. But yeah, it's an interesting addition to what we've got here. And then here you've got the master section with kind of an EQ here, wet, dry, and so forth input. Then you've got your modulation, and this is pretty easy to use. You click on this and then you hover over the kind of ring around any control, and then you can drag it here and it starts to modulate that. So that's great. Bipolar or unipolar. It'd be great, and maybe there is a way. I couldn't figure out a way of making it invert. Would be nice, just with a button. But nonetheless, this is nice, and you've got a lot of options here. It's got a wave, a follower, which is really useful with sensitivity. A rise and a fall. This is fantastic, really great. Often lacking in these kinds of effects, and I find this is just a great addition. So yeah, a real applause there for this. Great work on that. So it means you can link this to any parameter, so that, you know, the louder the input, the more it moves the effect, or vice versa. Again, it would be wonderful if you could do this in reverse, if you could reverse this effect so that, you know, the louder the less. Now maybe there's a way of doing that. I couldn't figure it out, so forgive me if there is a way of doing that, but if there isn't, I'd love that as a feature request. But in general, I give this a big thumbs up and think it sounds really, really great. So I'm going to just mess around with a few effects just so you can hear the sound and how it changes. So obviously you could be here for hours with all the variations, but I think you can hopefully hear, and I haven't even got into using the feedback and compressor here, but you can hear hopefully there is a vast range of different sounds here, and they're all sounding really nice to my ears, really interesting. There's a lot of interesting variation here, and a lot of a really great sonic playground here. So well done to Arturia for this. As I say, I find it very hard to find this kind of effect that doesn't just descend into complete destruction and sound just like basically driving a high gain amp into complete, destructive distortion once you pass it push it past a certain stage where you really want something new and different. Whereas this one, I'm not finding that. Yes, of course you can push it into that, but long before you get to that, you get all these areas of really interesting tone shaping and bring out unusual qualities in the sound that I find very rare in these. So yeah, a big thumbs up from me on this. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, please do give the video a like and ring the bell and subscribe. And if you can press the thanks button, that really helps the channel keep going. And hope to see you next time.